Survival isn't the ending, it's the plot twist. I recently sat down with LaShone Williams, a force of nature who survived the crack epidemic that tore through Chicago in the 80s, grew up with a parent battling addiction, and still managed to build a life that radiates purpose, impact, and an almost defiant kind of grace. LaShone isn't just changing lives, she's rewriting the narrative for Black women who've been told that survival is the best they can hope for. She's proving that the story doesn't end with just making it through, it begins there. And if you've ever felt like your past was a way too heavy to carry into your future, if you've ever wondered whether the chaos you survive disqualifies you from the peace you deserve, this conversation is for you. Let me be transparent. Growing up in chaos doesn't come with a user manual. There's no instruction booklet titled How to Build a Life When Home Feels Like a Battlefield. And yet, so many of us, particularly Black women, have done exactly that. We've turned instability into strategy. We've transformed pain into power. We've converted survival mode into success stories. But here's the part nobody talks about in polite company. We're tired, bone tired, soul tired. We've been strong for so long that we forgot softness was even an option, let alone a right. LaShone Williams reminded me that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about breaking, healing, and choosing to rise anyway, even when your knees are shaking and your heart is heavy. That's the truth we're unpacking today. Not the sanitized, Instagram friendly version of resilience, the real, messy, complicated kind that leaves scars and also builds empires. So let's talk about three truths LaShone shared, truths that echo through the lives of so many who've walked similar paths, truths that might just change how you see your own story. First truth: resilience is built in the chaos, not after it, not despite it, in it. When LaShawn was growing up in Chicago during the height of the crack epidemic, home wasn't a sanctuary. It was unpredictable. It was painful. It was a place where addiction dictated the rhythm of daily life, where stability was a luxury and safety was negotiable. But even in that instability, LaShawn found small wins: finishing homework when the lights were off, showing up to school when everything inside screamed to stay hidden, connecting with a teacher who saw potential buried under survival instincts. These weren't grand gestures, they were survival tactics that became building blocks for something bigger, something transformative. And that's the thing about chaos. It teaches you to find footholds where others see cliffs. It forces you to develop a kind of grit that can't be taught in a classroom or a boardroom or a self help seminar. It's the kind of strength that whispers, I made it through yesterday, so I can make it through today. And then one day you look up and realize you've made it through a decade, a career, a whole life. You've built something from nothing, and the foundation was laid in the rubble. But here's what we don't talk about enough. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. That resilience comes at a cost. It's not free, it's not easy, and it's definitely not something to romanticize with motivational quotes and filtered photos. Because while you're busy being strong, you're also learning to suppress your needs, to minimize your pain, to wear a cape you never asked for and can't seem to take off. You're learning that your feelings are inconvenient, that your exhaustion is a character flaw, that rest is for people who didn't have to fight their way out of the wreckage. And that's where the second truth comes in, and it's a hard one. You have to seek support networks early, not eventually, not when you finally earned it, early. LaShawn emphasized this. And it's backed by every story of triumph over trauma I've ever encountered, every life I've studied, every conversation I've had with women who made it out and made it work. You cannot do this alone. You were never meant to. Whether it's a mentor who sees your potential before you do, a faith community that holds you when you're falling apart, a chosen family that shows up when blood relatives don't, or a therapist who gives you permission to feel everything you've been stuffing down for years. You need people who see you, not just your survival skills, people who remind you that you're more than what you've endured, people who love you enough to tell you the truth, even when it stings. For LaShone, that network became a lifeline. It turned isolation into connection. It turned shame into shared experience. And it gave her permission to be human, not just heroic. Because here's the truth that'll set you free if you let it. The superwoman cape is a trap. It looks impressive from the outside, but it's suffocating on the inside. It's heavy, it's exhausting. And the moment you realize you can take it off, that you're allowed to take it off, that's when real healing begins. That's when you stop performing strength and start embodying wholeness. Which brings us to the third truth. And this one might be the most revolutionary of all. You get to redefine success on your terms, not your family's terms, not society's terms, not the terms dictated by the trauma you survived or the neighborhood you escaped or the expectations placed on you by people who've never walked a mile in your shoes, your terms. LaShawne's journey wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. It was about breaking cycles, not by being flawless, but by being intentional, by choosing differently, by claiming victories that others might overlook or dismiss. Victories like setting a boundary without apologizing for it, like saying no without guilt eating you alive, like resting without feeling like you have to justify your existence. Success, in the context of surviving an addicted parent and a drug ravaged neighborhood in a system designed to crush you, isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder or building wealth or checking boxes on someone else's list. It's about waking up and choosing peace. It's about creating a life where softness is possible, where joy isn't a luxury reserved for people with easier stories, but a birthright you claim with both hands. Now, let me ground this in some real stories because theory is nice, but lived experience is what moves us, what changes us, what makes us believe transformation is actually possible. Think about Oprah Winfrey for a moment. Born in rural Mississippi, raised in inner city Milwaukee during the late 60s and early 70s, right as the drug epidemic was beginning to devastate Black communities with a violence that's hard to overstate. Oprah's mother struggled, and the men in her life included addicts who brought chaos and danger into an already unstable home. Young Oprah faced extreme poverty, sexual abuse that no child should ever endure, teenage pregnancy, and an unstable home that mirrored the chaos LaShone described. The kind of chaos that breaks people, that convinces them their story is already written and the ending is tragic. But Oprah leaned on education like it was a life raft in a storm. She leaned on her grandmother's discipline, strict and uncompromising, the kind that said, "You will be more than this." She leaned on early media jobs that gave her a voice when her home tried to silence her, when the world told her she didn't matter. And later, much later, when she had the resources and the courage, she leaned on therapy, on boundaries, on self belief that was hard won and precious. She transformed trauma into empathy and built a $2.5 billion empire, not in spite of her past, but in some ways because of it, because she understood pain and could speak to it with an authenticity that resonated with millions. She launched The Oprah Winfrey Show in 1986, won 21 daytime Emmys, and rose from welfare to billionaire icon, shattering every ceiling in her path. But more than the money, more than the accolades, she normalized therapy for Black women. She made it okay to say, "I'm hurting and I need help." She founded the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls, creating opportunities for young women who looked like her and carried similar wounds. She turned her pain into a platform that's inspired millions to heal and lead. That's not just success, that's legacy. That's transformation. Then there's Roland G. Fryer Jr., a Harvard economist who grew up in a poor Daytona Beach, Florida neighborhood in the 80s. His mother was addicted to crack and abandoned him at age 5, just walked away and left him with his father and grandmother to navigate a world that felt like it was designed to swallow him whole. He dealt with gang involvement, poverty that was suffocating, and illiteracy until age 15. 15. Think about that. A young black boy in America, unable to read, surrounded by violence and drugs and a system that had already written him off. But his grandmother enforced education with tough love, the kind that didn't take no for an answer. Roland taught himself to read using comics, then pursued academic excellence in scholarships with a determination that bordered on obsession. He became the first in his family to attend college, earned a PhD from Penn in Chicago by 25, and became the youngest Black tenured professor at Harvard at 30. He won a MacArthur Genius Grant. He shattered Ivy League barriers that were never meant to let him in. And his research on inequality now empowers policy for Black upward mobility, influencing education reform nationwide, changing the game for kids who look like he used to. One supportive adult and grit rewrote his destiny. That's the power of refusing to let your origin story define your outcome. That's the power of finding one person who believes in you when you can't believe in yourself yet. And let's talk about Starlito, born Rodney Lamont Terry Jr., a Memphis rapper raised in 80s crack era housing projects where survival was the daily agenda. His mother's addiction led to foster care stints, street hustling, violence that became normal, and emotional voids in Memphis' drug ravaged Black communities that left scars most people will never see. The kind of childhood that statistically should have ended in prison or death, not success. But Starlito turned to music as therapy, as a way to process pain that had no other outlet. He leaned on paternal guidance when it was available and a relentless grind that refused to quit, dropping over 20 mixtapes and signing multi-million dollar deals with Drake's OVO and Eminem's Shady Records. He built an independent label generating millions, rising from the trap to mogul status, from survival to empire. And now he mentors young Black artists on resilience and promotes sobriety in hip hop, shifting narratives on addiction recovery in a culture that often glorifies the very things that destroy us. He turned pain into platinum art, proving that creative outlets heal and elevate, that your story can become your strength. These stories, Oprah's empathy, Fryer's intellect, Starlito's hustle, they echo LaShone Williams' journey. They echo the journeys of so many Black women and men who grew up in chaos and still chose to rise, who refused to let their zip code or their parents' struggles or society's low expectations write the final chapter. They remind us that survival isn't the end of the story, it's the plot twist. It's the moment where everything could have gone wrong, but somehow, against all odds, it went right. But here's where I want to challenge you, because it's one thing to hear these stories and feel inspired for a moment, and it's another thing entirely to apply them to your own life, to let them change you. So here's your call to action straight from LaShawne's playbook, and I want you to take this seriously. Identify one chaos win from your past. Maybe it was finishing school while your parent was struggling with addiction and the lights kept getting cut off. Maybe it was holding down a job while navigating homelessness and pretending everything was fine. Maybe it was simply surviving a day that felt impossible, a day when giving up seemed like the only logical option. Write it down. Don't just think about it. Write it. Journal about how that chaos win, that moment of defiance against impossible odds, fueled your success today, how it taught you something, how it built something in you that nothing else could have built. Then share it with a trusted circle this week. Not on social media for likes, not for performance. Share it with people who will hold it sacred, who will honor your story without trying to fix it or minimize it. Break the silence, build your network. Because your story, your survival, your softness, it all matters. It matters more than you know. LaShone Williams isn't asking for sympathy. She's offering a blueprint. She's saying, I made it, and so can you. She's proving that Black excellence rises from any ashes, that your past doesn't have to dictate your future, that chaos can become your compass if you let it guide you toward healing, not just hustle. The soft girl era isn't about being weak or passive or giving up. It's about being whole. It's about dropping the superwoman cape that's been choking you and picking up peace with both hands. It's about redefining strength as the courage to be soft, to rest without apology, to heal in public, to say no without guilt, to choose joy, even when the world tells you that you haven't earned it yet. It's about learning to be soft in a world that taught you survival was the only option. Your story doesn't end with survival, it begins there. And what you build next, that's entirely up to you. So go write down that chaos win, share it, own it. And remember, you don't have to be strong all the time. You just have to be you, soft, powerful, and finally beautifully free.